So, from the Caux roundtable perspective, what are some reflections on the current crisis going on with Greece and its debt and the EU negotiations?
Two thoughts come to mind, Eric. First is we put together this concept in our principles for governments, which also applies to businesses, of power should be seen as a trust. And so I was thinking about the government of Greece, not just this government, but over the last 10, 15 years, because this crisis has been years in building up. The debt that the Greeks have undertaken has been accumulating over the years to become a very large amount relative to the economy of Greece, which then creates the problem of repayment. They can't repay it. What is the responsibility of a government? And this is not whether it's of the right or of the left, which is fundamentally, why do we have governments? What should we expect of governments from an ethical point of view? And the concept is, in America, it's been expressed as a public office is a public trust. Government is stewardship. Government is a public trust. It's not there to serve the needs of the rulers. It's there to serve the needs of the community, the common good. And let's not sort of say, well, does this mean it has to be a democracy or it has to be a constitutional republic or this or that? The argument would be, and this goes back to, I think, most of the religions, even if you have a king is supposed to be responsible. And there are many traditions that say if the king is irresponsible, then the people are justified in rising up and overthrowing a cruel tyrant. So what does it mean to be a trustee for the Greeks? I think it then has to go to due care. One of the duties of a steward is due care. The aspect of due care is not to indulge in excessive risks. A trustee has to worry about the security of the beneficiaries. Don't take risks, or don't impose risks on those whom you're supposed to care for. And assuming too much debt is actually exposing your people to risk in the future. So there ought to be some force of moderation, of equilibrium, which says, yes, some debt is necessary, but if we go too far, we're actually putting ourselves on a slippery slope down, and we need to avoid that. So that's one thought. The second thought, which plays into that, is Adam Smith had this idea a long time ago where he talked about using other people's money. And his point was, in the context of businesses, that trustees sometimes get negligent because they don't see it as their own money. He says you take better care of your own money than you do of somebody else's money. But actually, we want the trustee to take as good care of the money for the beneficiaries as he or she would of he or she's own money. And so this phrase out there, other people's money, is used as a kind of a warning about a slippery slope. Things get negligent. People increase risk. That moral hazard arises when you're using other people's money. You're not as serious. You're not as careful. And so debt is using other people's money. And we saw that with Wall Street before the crash of 2008. The entire asset bubble was basically funded by debt. If people had 100% equity in all those subprime mortgages, they probably would not have bought them because they were too risky. If you're borrowing money and you can borrow a security and then sell it to somebody else who's also borrowed money to buy it, lots of transactions go forward which are not very sound. So borrowing money in excess, in gross, without moderation, is the use of other people's money, which then brings about moral hazard, which then means risks go up unnecessarily, and somebody's going to get hurt.